graciously present it in that way. So let's just give some people some time to kind of jump in.
To jump on that.
Yeah, we'll start with this as we're. Oh no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
No. Go ahead. It's fine. I was under the impression that I was the host, but it's okay if you want to. If you want to.
Sir, after you, sir.
I was gonna ask you, what kind of shows are you really enjoying right now, without giving away any spoilers in them?
Oh yeah, because you know I have a habit of doing that.
Yes, you have spoilers on deck.
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned in the message, Only Murders in the Building has been fantastic. Every season to me has just been great writing, acting. The story is good. I'm in love with New York, so like it, it helps that they film at the famous, I think it's like Arconium or something like that. I forget the actual name of the building, but it's so dope. So
the name in real life is different, because the last time we were out there, I was looking for it. It wasn't under that same name, so it's a made up name for the show.
Yeah,
but the building is real. The building is real.
Yeah, the building's real. So really love that. I just finished watching Ahsoka in the Star Wars, series. It's been phenomenal. I plan to watch Loki over Thanksgiving break. So, and then Nat Geo just put out, I think, a documentary on the JFK assassination. So I'll probably go back and watch that. So that point of history is still like so fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just, the situation. Yeah, just surrounding his assassination, the grief that caused for so many people who were hopeful in a man like JFK, and then also like,
right,
what did our government do? I know they're listening right now, so I just
that one still, I think, baffles most Americans. I don't know. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I did see that one of the Secret Service agents recently came out and said like he found another bullet like in the seat cushion or something like that. Yeah. And of course, I mean, I don't know. The guy is older, so I don't want to like, put anything on his name, but I was very fascinated with the article.
Oh, wow.
But if you were just joining in, welcome to our stream today. My name is McKay. I'm joined with Pastor Fredo. We are going to be talking through some of the Oblivious sermons, talking about hospitality specifically today. If you guys have questions for Pastor Fredo, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will answer those live on stream with you. But yeah, right now we're just.
Tyler said, "Oh yeah, you've been sleeping." Yeah, I have been sleeping on Loki, man. I have.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait. Can't wait.
I'm an episode and a half into Loki, so I watched the first one and got halfway through the second episode, and then my brother-in-law and his girlfriend got to my house, so we turned the TV off and started kicking it with family. But I love Loki. He's one of my favorite characters in the Marvel universe. Him and Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, those two are just like what they've experienced in the cinematic universe and how they are experienced in the comics. Just grade A characters.
Yeah, man. I can't wait. Can't wait to see what happens. So
this one's kind of off. I didn't really prep you for this question, but do you have any? I think we talked about before the writers' strike in Hollywood. I saw they reached a tentative agreement. Have you heard anything about that, or have any thoughts about the entertainment industry finding a work agreement again?
I mean, it's good to see. So I definitely feel like there's something to be said for writers and everyone else at that level and maybe below them, right on the org chart, so to speak, are certainly worthy of the wage, man. So especially if you have these people at the near top who are like eating very good, like, come on, y'all, you gotta make an agreement, man. But then I also like just find it somewhat like ironic in the sense that like they're the story hubbing, like, or the storytelling hub, right? The storytelling hub. So it feels like y'all are at the center of trying to tell stories about justice and looking out for the little guy, and here you guys are having this issue yourselves, so it's a bit ironic in that sense. But yeah, hopefully the agreement sticks and we get back to telling good stories, so maybe there'll be a movie on the strike.
Maybe we,
Yeah.
we never know. Maybe we'll get a better Star Wars ending outside of somehow Palpatine lives. Now that they have a better work agreement.
Yeah, right.
I mean, Fredo, you don't talk about Star Wars a lot, but Star Wars does get some references in your sermons. What are your genuine thoughts on episodes 7 through 9? Because I already know you think 4 through 6 the greatest, which is true, but 7 through 9, the Disney adaptation, what are you thinking there?
That's it, bro. That's my thoughts. I was really hopeful with The Force Awakens. And then yeah, dude, The Last Jedi I initially liked, and then like when I rewatch it, I'm like, what is this? Nah, man. And I really like Rian Johnson as a director. There's a rumor that he's a Christian too. I heard that somewhere, and he's talked about his own upbringing, like his own religious upbringing and stuff. But I don't know what he was doing with the Force. I don't know what he was doing with Luke. Finn felt like a throwaway character, like a comedic relief. I don't know. He's walking around with like a leaky suit, like in the first scene of the movie. It's just, man, yeah. So there was like so many parts to it, but then like Last Jedi did give us like some beautiful cinematography, and then The Rise of Skywalker is it's just bad, bro. It's just so bad. It's 3 hours of bad
Hey,
storytelling, dude.
I'm
The
only
line
gonna
we
say
always talk about, somehow Palpatine is returned. What writer got away with saying that, dude? What room were they in when someone's like, "Oh yeah, we'll greenlight that line"? Like, that's just so crazy to me.
I'm just gonna say this, and then we got to get into our topic. But I
Yeah,
said The Last Jedi was trash, and you fought me on it for like a good 6 months.
I did. I was one of those. I was one of those who definitely like initially thought, "Oh no, it's so groundbreaking and so different." And then when I went back and watched it, especially after like Mando 1 and 2 were out, and then yeah, there was just like other shows. Andor hadn't come out yet, but at least Mando did. And yeah, I remember watching it one day, and I just thought, no, this is not it. This actually like some things with it, even though Rian Johnson does call back to some old like Star Wars books
Right.
in the expanded universe with some of his Force explanation. I just felt like the way it went down, man, not helpful. Look at Loki's blowing up in the comment section. No Loki.
We are avoiding all Loki spoilers. But Morgan asked, "What's your favorite redemption story in TV and or film? Do you have a favorite one?"
I mean, Darth Vader would be up there for me. So he's simultaneously like the most significant villain, most ominous, and yet at the same time, like probably has a significant act of sacrificial love in saving Luke and dealing with the Emperor, who somehow came back.
Yeah.
But I love his redemptive arc. Who else would I say has a redemptive arc? Oh man, there's not a lot of like recent interpretations of them. I can't think of anything. I was almost gonna like explore the Breaking Bad one, but I don't know how much redemption.
So I was gonna say, my favorite redemption story is Simba and the Lion King. Can't beat that redemption story. But I was gonna argue that Breaking Bad actually does have a good redemption arc. It doesn't end in a happy ending, and I think that needs to be told in some stories about redemption. You don't always get a happy ending. Sometimes you have to face your consequences, but I would argue it's a good redemption.
Yeah. Tyler mentioned maybe Jesse in Breaking Bad was, but I think what fascinated us with Breaking Bad was just watching the spiral, watching the ongoing downfall, of someone. So, and then humbly understanding the gravity, like just where a human being can go in a moment of desperation, So,
yeah.
But man,
yeah. Well, cool. That is one of my favorite conversations is talking redemption in film.
Yeah. Brian asked, "How about the dad in Succession?" Oh man, I don't know if it's redemptive. I mean, I don't want to ruin too much.
I never finished Succession. I couldn't get it. I got through season 1 and just completely fell off after that. So I can't speak on the Succession story, but
Yeah, I don't know if there is redemption. There is a conversation between the dad and his children in a room in a particular episode of the last season that I thought was close to a moment of redemption. Like, given all the betrayal that's happening, like the family coup that almost takes place, and the positioning for power, but the way, oh yeah, without ruining too much of how the last season ends, I just feel like the way a homeboy, you know, you know, kind of says, I don't know if there's much redemption for his children. In fact, Shiv, I think, has one of the most powerful statements she makes about her dad, in that she hated him and she loved him. And yeah, oh gosh, yeah, I don't want to ruin what Succession,
yeah.
how it goes, but yeah,
Yeah. Those are, I mean, it's a great conversation.
yeah,
Maybe that'll be our conversation for a stream in the near
yeah.
future. But
One day I
let's
will. Yeah, we'll get to the topic. So I'm still on Succession. Yeah, I'm about to go to Romulus. Romulus, I think, has a moment in the season finale where he
Oh
says
yeah.
something about, like, it's all nothing. We're nothing. It's all garbage. Like, there's a boardroom moment, and he says that, and I think he's actually like touching salvation. I think he's, in the sense of, like, he's breaking out of what he's been trapped in and enslaved to for so long, even as a wealthy person. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but
That's good. That's good stuff right there. Let's segue into your message this weekend. You spoke about sharing your faith and how that can look like, or what that can look like through hospitality.
mm-hmm.
Chat, if you guys have any questions for Pastor Fredo, feel free to drop them in the chat. I will be keeping track and trying to guide us through this conversation. So if we don't get to your question right away, we'll do our best to get to it at some point in the stream. But Fredo, let's just start with you. What have been some of your responses from the message this weekend? How do you feel after preaching it and kind of reflecting on it some more? I'll start with that question first.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's so much potential in us recapturing a posture of welcoming people in. Again, whether that's in our homes, whether that's like at our lunch break, whether that's over coffee or in small ways, maybe it's just a phone call, right? Like, I think there's a lot of kinds of expressions of hospitality that I think if we recaptured, they would be immensely helpful in the ways that we're able to actually communicate our faith in an effective way, that actually meets people where they're at, and not where we want them to be, which was my main kind of like a driving thought throughout this sermon, was that we're very unaware, we're very oblivious of where people are actually at. And so then when we try to communicate faith or the good news or some explanation of the good news, it lands flat. It doesn't quite make sense, And so hospitality is a very human, like, disarming thing that I think provides a better environment for that to happen. So
Yeah, definitely. And how would you explain? I guess you kind of just did, but I remember sitting into the sermon and thinking like, okay, if I was a new Christian, I understand like, okay, the need to start inviting people into my home or meeting up with coffee, but sometimes that can feel like, okay, I'm inviting you to coffee and I have in my mind, we're going to get to the gospel conversation by the end of it. How would you prep people in our church that are just trying to figure out what does it mean to be hospitable without having to worry about saying the right thing or leading the conversation in a specific way to share faith?
yeah, I would
Does that make
say,
sense?
yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, part of me goes back to my early days as a Christian. I, unfortunately, because I just thought I needed to, I cut off a lot of relationships with my non-Christian friends, like with people who didn't identify as following Jesus, right? Because I just thought I needed to be with Christian community, which you do. Um, and so I think I swung the pendulum too far the other way. And so I would say to a new believer, don't cut those other relationships off. Like, still engage with them. Can they influence you? Yes. Can they lead you down the wrong road? Of course they can. But they're also searching, right? And so think about ways over a meal that you can communicate, here's what Jesus is doing in my life, And it doesn't have to be big, massive, elaborate things. It could be simple, like continue the relationships as you have them, and not cut them off. That would be my first thought, because I think, new believers, there's an excitement. You're like zealous, and sometimes that comes at the cost of like dropping old friends for the fear of like you don't want them to influence you, right? And of course that means like you got to use wisdom. Like maybe you don't go to certain parties, right? And you don't find yourself in certain environments, but that doesn't mean you can't invite them to your thing, to grab a meal with you, to grab a coffee with you, So I think, there's something there. There's something there. So, yeah.
And I think one of the encouraging parts about that is like, if you're nervous for this type of step in your faith, over a meal or over coffee is very easy, because that conversation can be as long or as short as you need it to be. If it's over coffee, you could be like, all right, well, coffee's done, I gotta go, run off to this next thing. Or when the meal's over, it's like, do the famous Fredo pat and keep it moving. But we have a question from Nick. He asked, how do you fuse what the Bible says with hospitality when you're talking about a difficult topic with someone, i.e. homosexuality, transgenderism? And he said, especially when those topics pertain to them. So I think he's asking, how do you create a hospitable place while addressing these topics? Nick, feel free to correct me if I'm wording that wrong, but Pastor Fredo, how would you start to address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think your relationship with that person dictates like the ability to talk about those kinds of things, right? So like, if this is a friend, say you have a friend who's a homosexual, like certainly the friendship creates the strength and the equity for you to be able to have that conversation. And because they're in that position, or because that's how they are, identify themselves when it comes to their sexuality, shouldn't impact the relationship, right? Like if anything, you want to continue to be present in their life, and understanding their story, the journey they're on, and the hope for them in Jesus, especially if they're genuinely curious about how to embrace the teachings of Jesus with their own personal experience. I think there's so much to happen there through that friendship still, and so I think hospitality positions us to not be afraid of topics and not be afraid of things, because the relationship is what's foundational, right? Like I care about you, I love you, even if that means at the end of this dinner you're not going to agree with my understanding of sexual ethics, right? Like I think the fact that you're going to remain close to them in their life, you're going to continue to invite them over, you're going to continue to care about the things they care about, is the apologetic. In other words, it is the form of evangelism. Like they are witnessing the unconditional love of God through your persistent presence and desire to care for them and be involved in their life, and so I think and I think you just rely on the environment of being hospitable to allow you permission to kind of enter into more challenging combos, and you still utilize the tool of just asking discovering questions. Like when you say that you identify as this, help me understand what that means, right? Because I think Preston Sprinkle in his book Embodied on this particular topic says, if you've met a transgender person, you've met one transgender person, right? Like, so everyone's experience is very unique. And so it could be very misleading and unhelpful to kind of categorize an entire group of people based on one understanding or one experience or one explanation of who they are, And so, I think it's so crucial.
Yeah, that's good, man. Nick, thank you for that question.
Hopefully that helps. I know Brian had asked an earlier question too around hospitality. Is it uniquely important? Is it a uniquely important evangelism tool in this cultural moment? Yeah, I would say absolutely, because you factor in just the loneliness that people are experiencing today, right? How hostile people are, right? And so the fact that you would already be in a very relational setting, like at the table with someone, and then start to share faith, I think really like lowers the temperature of a room. So I think it is. I mean, I might be wrong in this, but I think it's the primary way that we can share our faith, honestly, is through our hospitality. So yes, it's a unique tool in our unique kind of modern moment, but I think it's also the primary tool that we should lean into, is hospitality, So Yeah, I think there's something there to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely think in a culture of hostility, that invitation to a meal or to a coffee or to a moment of just hanging out,
Yeah,
is pretty it's like disarming. It kind of takes away some of that hostility of like, someone asked me to go eat, I'm like, I'm there, let's do it. I'm ready for whatever we got cooking. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I agree with you. I do think it is a uniquely important tool, and one that, if we can recapture, will have great benefits for the kingdom.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Morgan asked us a question, more on the practical side. They said, I'd love to throw dinner parties, but that's not really in the budget these days. Can you give some affordable ways to be hospitable, or are there other ways that don't require tons of money?
yeah. Oh man, I love that question. Hopefully, if you've heard the message, like you'll hear the part where we talk about the difference between hospitality and entertainment. Right? It's not necessarily about throwing a massive shindig, as some people would call it, but I also shared the story about a young guy at our church whose name is Matt, who was basically just saying, "Hey, at our lunch break, he's in his office. Like, let's meet in the break room. You bring your lunch, I'll bring my lunch." That's pretty that's pretty cost efficient, you know. So I think there's something to be said for just yeah, if you know everyone's got their lunch, like to just be intentional about let's meet up, like let's just enjoy it together, you know. And so
Hmm.
maybe taking your break when you know someone else is going to take theirs. Maybe you just meet for coffee or tea or whatever your kind of thing is. Maybe it's after the workout, you're at the gym and you guys both go grab, you know, a protein bowl or whatever it is afterwards. Like you do something low budget, you know what I'm saying? Or you get a $5 pizza and you go that route too, you know. So I think there's a lot of creative ways for people to express hospitality, you know. And that's what I like about the New Testament's call for it. It's not it's not very like technical on here's how you have to do it. It just says
Right.
practice hospitality, right? And so
Hmm.
in that culture, they would have had their understanding of what hospitality looks like. And now it's on us in the West in 2023 to then interpret that for our day and age. Like
Yeah.
if hospitality is about a welcoming spirit, you're open in your time, your calendar, all that, you have a meal, then how can I do that in a way that makes sense to me? You know, so yeah, I think I think finding creative ways to keep costs down could be really helpful. Or it's a potluck, everyone's got to bring something. You know,
Hmm.
that's another way to do it. So
Yeah, I've even experienced in my time serving with our youth ministry here at Hunter Park. Um, there's a period of time where my students just started getting into DJing like I do. Um, and one way to be super hospitable to them, I was like, all right, just come over. We'll post up in the garage where my turntables are set up, and we're just all going to practice DJing. Um,
yeah,
and there's no food included. Like, I had water for them. I had snacks that I, had around the house, but it wasn't like this massively planned thing. It was just, um, I think I would phrase it as like I was being hospitable with my time, and just
hmm,
inviting them into a part of my life. Like, I remember in high school, um, I would have youth leaders that would just be like, "Hey, I have to go run some errands. You want to go with me?" And we would just go out and go to the grocery store, go whatever errands they had to get done for the day. But that meant impact on me because it was inviting me into an aspect of their life that I wouldn't get to see, um,
yeah,
and it allowed faith to be played out in a relational way instead of a strictly like teaching, type of way. I guess I
yeah,
would say. Hmm.
yeah. That's so yeah. I think that's a great thing. Anytime you have maybe a shared experience or yeah, there's a routine thing you do in your calendar, find ways to maybe invite people into that process. You know, who maybe have a similar interest. So yeah, that's super helpful. I love Jalil. Hopefully, I'm saying your name right. Jalil talked about love is very principle um, in our walk with God. Yeah, it's absolutely critical, man. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So this was a great sermon that we had, Fredo. I know in in some of it you talked about, like I said, entertainment versus hospitality and how some of that played out. But you also mentioned that sometimes there's like tools we could use to share the faith, and other
hmm,
times, um, it is that relational, just do as I do kind of, situation. In your experience, how did you learn to distinguish between when to use either tool or relationship? Because I think most interactions with sharing faith can be a both and or a one and the other. Um, So as you've navigated this, what does that look like for you to do tool versus presence?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm in a scenario and someone just outright says, "Can you explain the gospel of Jesus to me?" I'll certainly use a tool, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes I work in categories of like just God, the world, Jesus, and then a response to that, right? Like I try to keep it as simple as I can. God, the world, Jesus, and then our response to Jesus, right? Um, yeah, I mean, at times I've tried to explain the bridge. That's maybe one I've used in the past with the cross in the middle, and like, there's that gap of God and the world, and explain sin, right? So like, but yeah, visual tools are immensely helpful. So I think just knowing that person, like if it's someone in your life that you're going to get more time with, you probably don't need to be like, okay, I got to say everything, because there's chances are you'll see them again, Lord willing. Um, if there's someone that maybe you're having like a chance encounter with, and it's probably going to be really brief, then I think just getting right to it, like, man, consider the words of Jesus, that he loves you, and that he actually died and rose for you, and that he
Mm,
invites you to follow him.
yeah.
So I find myself lately framing it around an invitation to follow him. Even with my friends who are maybe like would identify differently, like when it comes to their sexuality, and they have like maybe a sense that those are the barriers to following Jesus, I still say, be who you are, follow Jesus, and consider how submitting your desires to him could actually lead to a more free life, right? So like I keep things very invitational in my explanation. Again,
Hmm.
unless there's a moment where someone wants to hear outright, like piece by piece, an explanation
Right.
of the gospel. But there's 1,000 ways to explain the good news.
Hmm.
And so and especially when you hear Jesus use the word good news, or when he talks about the gospel, he has a different way of, I think, framing it each time when you read the gospels, right? So I think there's something to be learned from that too. But if you're part of Sandals, if you stay close to what we're doing, like, you'll hear us, give the bridge tool. You'll hear us talk about the three circles, ways that you can explain sin, the world, how we've kind of fallen from God, and Jesus as a solution to respond and to come back, right? And so they're helpful moments for that. But I think it's a in that moment situation where you're discerning, okay, this is a good time to now explain it as thoroughly as I can, and offer them an invitation to respond, and to give them a chance to pray. Like, all right, I want to pray. I want to say, God, I'm sorry for my sin. Would you forgive me and save me, and
Hmm.
help me as I start following Jesus. So it's not common that I actually have someone repeat after me a prayer. I just encourage them to pray, like, cry out to God. God, I'm sorry. Would you forgive me? I remember doing that with a young man at Palm Avenue on a Sunday night. He had come in. He actually was an old student of mine who wasn't a Christian, and he knew I was a pastor there, and his life was just in a difficult spot. And he was like, I need to follow Jesus. I need forgiveness. And I said, great, let's pray. I'm going to have you pray, and I'm going to listen to you pray. And it's like, it was just a beautiful, honest rambling of a prayer to God for forgiveness and for life, and for life change. And it was beautiful. So I think even in that way, it's okay to encourage
Hmm.
people just to be honest as they cry out to God. So
Yeah. And it sounds like maybe the other side of the coin to this is going to require a lot of patience. Like we have to be patient
yeah,
with others as they navigate what it means to follow Jesus. The same way that for the most of us, our discipleship process takes the rest of our life. You know what I mean? It's who I am as a Christian today is not the same Christian I was when I first started following Jesus.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I think one of the things I had to unlearn is that every conversation where the gospel was shared, there needed to be a decision in that moment. Um,
Hmm.
and I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think as we're called to disciple people, we're called into a relationship with those people. So it's going to take some more time and I guess willingness to just be with people where they're at and help guide them through that.
Right. Right. Because I mean, when you think about like Jesus's conversations with people, the way he interacted with them, there's no way everyone he talked to was ready to make a decision. There's no way. Right.
Yeah.
And in the case of Luke 19, I think there is a contrast between Zacchaeus, the tax collector, and an encounter right before that with the rich young ruler who goes home
Mm,
sorrowful because he can't
mm,
detach from his goods. Right. So I think maybe there's a comparison happening there between two individuals who are very wealthy, who have somewhat different outcomes in their interactions with Jesus, right? One is ready to give half to the poor, repay other people back 4 times, have a meal with him. The other's like, I love my stuff and can't imagine their life and identity apart from the things that they possess, So,
Mm-hmm.
I think to your point, man, there'll probably be way more combos with people who just need to go home and process, and you don't necessarily seal the deal and they, come to a place of repentance. But
Right.
that's okay, that's okay too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So we got another question from Nick. He asked, what are some of the ways the church needs to change to grow in hospitality? Lately, it seems like the church and the rest of the world are butting heads more often than not. Um, so yeah, how would you, Pastor Fredo, start adapting and modeling this hospitality that the church needs?
Oh man, great thought. One thing that comes to my mind would be, don't try to give an answer to a question they're not asking. So
Mm,
oftentimes, like when you're in a situation where you're able to be hospitable, what their real needs are become very apparent,
mm,
and then you're able to go from there, right? So like, but when we just try to assume we know where someone's at and then start to share with them, we oftentimes are trying to offer them solutions that don't make any sense to where they're actually at and what they're actually dealing with, right? So I think of the case when Jesus encounters a man actually on his way into Jericho. He interacts with the blind man, and when he's begging, he goes up to him and says, "What do you need?" Like he actually lets the blind man inform Jesus what he needs, even though to the
wow. Yeah.
crowds it's very obvious. Like, this
Hmm.
man is a blind beggar.
Yeah.
Of course, he would love his sight,
Hmm.
and he probably would have been ignored by hundreds of other guests traveling that same road. But Jesus, on his way to Jerusalem, pauses, and then he asks him the question first: "What do you need? What would you like me to
Hmm.
do?" So he allows him to kind of dictate what his needs are, And so I think maybe the church, one adjustment we can make would be allowing our guests, our neighbors, to voice their concerns or to voice their needs,
Mm,
rather than us assuming, here's what they need to hear from us or here's what they need us to do for them, So I
yeah.
think hospitality helps in that way. I think any ways that we can deprogram ourselves so that we're actually available for people would be really good, right? Like
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
lot of Christians, hospitality feels like an added thing to the calendar because maybe we're just doing too much. And maybe our church expression also has us doing too much at times, So,
Mm,
um, yeah. And then I think lastly, I think the new apologetic, in other words, apologetics is a term that we use to describe like giving people the reason for why we believe what we believe. I think
hmm.
the new apologetic of the new world is repentance. So I think
Mm,
beginning our hospitality, our relationships with I'm sorry that many Christians have not lived up to the standard of Jesus. That's a very real thing. Your criticisms of the church are probably fair in a lot of cases, and so I want to hear you on that, apologize for that, and then move forward. So I think that could also be a way forward. So, and then the meal, the time together, actually is an embodiment of your apology.
mm,
And a
mm.
desire to make
Yeah.
things right and move forward. So
That's
because I think
good.
if that person goes back to work and they hear someone else bashing Christians, they're like, well, wait a minute, I know a Christian. In fact, I just had a meal with them, and like it was very different.
Right.
And they were kind and they acknowledged my concerns. So I think that can be really, really helpful, I think, in our current moment.
Yeah. Man, that's good. That is good right there. Morgan, she said, this isn't a question, but I really liked what you pointed out in the message this week about how Jesus always started as the guest, but consistently became the host. I,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
apologize. I don't fully remember this point. So can you give me the recap
Come
of,
on,
of where
McKay.
you were going in this message?
Yeah, it was when we were talking about distinguishing between hospitality and entertainment. We're not
Mm,
trying to, entertain. Entertainment maybe kind of has a clear host, a clear guest. You're trying to perform. But in hospitality, there's a mutual giving and receiving. So you come ready not just to take from someone, but you come ready to give to them as well. And so Jesus blurred that line so well, where he would, either invite himself over, like in the case of Zacchaeus, or in other scenarios, it almost felt like he was the one guiding the experience. He was the one guiding the party, so to speak, in his conversation or in the question, So, I think, he just blurs the line between, okay, who's the host here? Like, who's in charge of everything, and who's the guest here?
Right.
So, I think that's very much the case.
Man, that's good. That's good, man. I apologize I don't know what happened during that part of the message, but
you blacked out, bro. You blacked out.
I felt so cared for in the hospitality of Paul Mapp. But yeah, chat, thank you for these questions. These have been great. Fredo, do you have any kind of final thoughts or any other things you would want to communicate around this idea of hospitality and sharing our faith?
I think, we're about a week or so away from Thanksgiving, about 5 or 6 away from Christmas. People need us to be present to them. I think, obviously the holidays come with a whole bag of just stuff to do, ongoing relational conflict in your families, right? And so hospitality might feel like an added thing, but I can imagine a scenario in which people feel seen and loved in an invitation just to spend some extra time with them, So, and I think it's natural. I think in all of our spirits, like during this time of the year, we actually like long to be gathered with people, It's like, I think people look forward to that. And so, maybe there's an opportunity to invite people in that way, just during this particular season. So it can be immensely helpful. Even before you say, hey, come to church, it's going to be big on Christmas Eve, and all those other things, which, I mean, again, people are more prone to like visit a place, a religious place or a church on Christmas Eve. But I think maybe you can start with an invitation to the house, or let's go out and grab food, let's go get coffee, some ramen, whatever suits you, and whatever the weather's like that day, man. Get something nice and warm,
Yeah, so, it's soup season.
Yeah, right. So, or you just show up to the office with an extra lunch for someone, say, hey, man. So,
yeah. That's good, man. That's good. Pastor Fredo, thank you for jumping on this with us for a little while. Thank you to everyone that submitted questions. We will be back early in the month of December doing this again. We'll be in our new series by then, so we'll have a whole different range of topics to discuss. But we love you guys. We hope this has been a blessing to you. If you would like to contact Pastor Fredo and I, you could email Fredo. Is it Alfredo Ramos? Is that your full email?
Alfredo Ramos at sandalschurch.com.
Email Alfredo. You can email McKay Vandenberg at sandalschurch.com. That one might be a little bit harder to remember.
McKee's.
McKee. Yeah, don't email McKee because that's not me.
Hit me up at McKee's.
All right, Fredo, I appreciate you. Sandals Church. We'll see you next time. Grace and peace.